John Hook's Newsmaker Saturday starts now.
Thanks for joining us on Newsmaker Saturday. A week ago, Phoenix police officers walked into a horrific ambush while trying to save a baby in the midst of a suspect who had fatally shot his girlfriend and then barricaded himself inside the house. These are situations that police train for, but how do you prepare for a suspect who invites the first officer inside the home and then suddenly opens fire on him, wounding him and 4 other officers, and then beyond that, 4 more were hit with shrapnel? Andy Anderson is a former assistant chief of police for the city of Phoenix, 37 years in law enforcement. Andy, thank you for joining us. I really wanted you to put some perspective on what we're seeing out there on the street. We are in kind of uncharted territory. I think this is 5 that I can count officers attacked within the last 6-7 weeks.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Thank you for having me on. And, you know, it's a difficult thing to watch happen. You know, I spent my adult life in policing. You never stop caring about that. You never stop caring about the people that are out there doing it now. And so these are very challenging times and difficult things to watch right now.
Andy, is there some change? We're going to look at the video of what happened out there. And this is pretty rare. We don't often get this. A stringer happened to be out there and shooting this situation. There it is. I mean, this is mayhem. When you see this, what do you see as a guy who's been in law enforcement for 37 years?
Well, the reality of this is this is not that unique. I mean, I realize that what we have here is we're seeing it, obviously, that's unique. But what these officers deal with every night is just that unpredictable. You know, when they get a call, the information they have is what a citizen has given them over the phone. So what little bit a citizen knows, that's what they're basing their information on. And when they show up at that scene, they have no idea what's on the other side of that door. They have no idea what's really going on until they begin to investigate and move forward on it. And you can see how they're exposed. You know, in that second situation where you're seeing the firing, I mean, that's into this a little bit. You know, that first officer's already been invited into the home, and then the suspect opened fire on him when he walked in. He was able to get back, get some help, call for help, and then they're removing that second subject who ends up being the brother of the victim. And then they set down a baby. Now you got a baby to deal with. But I got to tell you, I'm not shocked by the circumstances that occurred here in the events, because that's just kind of how it happens. It just, you deal with it as it happens. And there's no way in the world you can possibly train for every situation that's going to occur to them.
Okay, a couple of things. Do you believe that the tenor of the discussion toward law enforcement in the past 2 or 3 years, really, I would say since George Floyd, that this has created a climate, I don't want to say where it's open season on police, but where suspects in their mind may have some justification, misguided justification that, you know, I'm going to go ahead and shoot because some type of line here has been erased.
I don't disagree with that at all. And, you know, our leadership makes a big difference in how we do everything. You know, it's the same in policing. It's the same in pretty much anything you look at as you follow the leader of your organization. And, you know, this has changed over the last few years. And I can tell you, when you go back to the Floyd situation, every law enforcement leader in the nation condemned those actions, but it didn't make any difference. They continued to have the negative press and the negative publicity about what was occurring out there. And even though we had a rather isolated incident in terms of the mistakes officers made, officers nationwide paid for that.
Okay, so here's the other part of the equation that I have to ask you about tactically that night with the ambush on these officers. When the first officer goes in, the suspect who eventually opens fire on him has invited him into the home. Is it possible that the officer in this environment and climate of trying to de-escalate and trying not to pull his weapon if he doesn't have to, does he get lured into a trap because he's trying to kind of play this in a way that's so defensive that he opens himself up possibly to being ambushed?
Well,
do you catch my drift?
that's a fear we have, that our community has. It's a fear I have of law enforcement, that we have been so critical of officers' actions that they will hesitate and they will be hurt because of that hesitation, or someone else will get hurt because of that hesitation. And I think that's a very real possibility. Now, I don't know in this particular situation, because we have to understand that we know so much more about this now than that officer did at the time. He's responding to a possible shooting at that location and dealing with things as they unfold in front of him. And that's pretty common. That's pretty much how every officer deals with almost every call they deal with.
There's been some discussion this week, and we'll show the video. This is out of LA. This is LAPD using a drone on a barricade suspect. The city council just this week approved buying some drones so that law enforcement will have this tool. This is an actual event. They flew in here with a drone to try to get a better look at the person who was barricaded inside this apartment complex. Do you see a value in this kind of tool? And I was surprised PD didn't have it already.
Oh, well, you and me both. Absolutely, I see a value in this. Anything we can have that will help our officers stay safer is a positive thing, and we should do it. If we just save one officer from injury because we had a drone out there, that's huge, and it's well worth it. Thank goodness Glendale had one close by and was able to provide, but I don't know that it made much difference at that point. But yes, those are positive things. And technology is moving very quickly. That technology that impacts policing, though, has not moved as quickly.
Yeah.
And law enforcement needs to stay on top of that. And we need to partner with private industry and find better ways, to find safer ways for officers to do their job and to take people in custody.
Tyler Moldovan, 2 months ago now. It's been 2 months. Again, trying to track down a suspect. Suspect's behind a wall. He calls for him to come out, and the guy comes out, gun blazing. Shoots him and continues to shoot Tyler Moldovan when he's on the ground. Andy, the lack of concern over human life out there, it is really unbelievable.
Well, and probably an individual that had no business being out of jail. That was a career criminal that probably had no business being released. I don't know enough about his background in terms of how that all happened, but, is that really who we want in our communities? And that's really what this is about, is trying to keep our community safe. The police can't do that on their own. The police work in conjunction with the community to create safe neighborhoods and create a place where we can raise our families, our kids can play, and we can walk our neighborhoods and enjoy being around one another and not do that in fear. But that doesn't happen by not supporting law enforcement. That happens when communities engage with law enforcement and they work together.
Andy, how about bridging this gap that still seems to exist between communities of color and the cops? How do you, first of all, recruit officers of color so that people being police see a face that they say, okay, this person looks like me, makes them feel maybe more comfortable with who's arresting them or who is talking to them or questioning them? How do we get there? Because it's got to be really tough right now to recruit, particularly African-American recruits. That's got to be really difficult right now in this environment.
It's difficult to recruit anybody right now, absolutely. But it has always been difficult to recruit minorities into policing. I ran hiring for about 3 years, and we sent teams across the nation to find people to hire to bring out to Arizona. There's very few professions that are scrutinized as closely as law enforcement. When the testing you go through, the background process that you have to go through, the psychological testing, when all's said and done, law enforcement typically hires less than 10% of the people that apply for that job. So it's not an easy job to get into. And then once you're there, you're scrutinized pretty closely also. But let's talk a little bit about the minority communities. When I go in and work in a minority community, some of them may not like me already because I'm white, because I'm a police officer. But they're going to deal with that. But when a black officer or a minority officer goes into that community, they may treat him 10 times worse than they treat me. It's a much harder job for a minority to do. And so that's part of the reason it's so difficult. And that I got a ton of respect for those that are willing to step up and do that job, because it's hard. It's a hard job for anybody, but for a minority to walk into a minority community see the way they get treated sometimes, it's just heartbreaking.
I want to show you the video of the 13-year-old girl who ended up, in a scuffle with an officer. The officer is seen on camera punching this girl. And I wanted to get your take on it because of what we don't see here. Now, obviously, at the time the officers are involved with this girl, they don't know that she's 13, right?
Yeah.
So what are we missing when we look at this? Because at first blush, you go, wait a minute, the officer's over the top. Then you start seeing other angles and you think, well, wait a minute, maybe the officer was totally justified here.
Yeah, this is an interesting situation because those officers are responding to that apartment complex looking for auto theft suspects. Those suspects, the owner of that vehicle was following his vehicle and called for police. And they went to that apartment complex, the suspects did, and then they bailed out there and they were being arrested. I think they had 3 officers or 4 officers on that male suspect and still had trouble getting him handcuffed. And I got to tell you, unless you try to take somebody into custody who does not want to go into custody, you have no idea how challenging that could be. But once they got him into custody and began to walk him away, now during this whole time, adults in that area that lived in that complex were harassing the officers, yelling at them, telling them to stop doing what they're doing. And I am confident that they probably had no idea why those officers were even there. But they were harassing them and yelling at him. And then as they stood up this suspect and had him cuffed behind his back and began to walk him away, this 13-year-old girl walked directly up to the suspect, walked right into the middle of those officers and actually touched that suspect. When she was pushed aside and that female officer went to push her aside, she actually slapped the officer or hit the officer in the face. Well, I can assure you, if you hit a police officer, that's not going to end well for you. So, but although I believe that young lady needs to be held accountable, the real responsibility behind this are the adults. The adults in that area set the tone for this, and she simply was following their lead.
It's gotten tougher to police these days. There's no doubt about it. And the cameras are a double-edged sword. Everything gets second-guessed, but the cameras can also help find the truth, right?
Well, the reality of it is that we all act better when we're on camera. Both sides of us do. And so a lot of the complaints have gone away. A lot of the actions that would have taken place maybe have gone away. That's a positive thing. The negative is, as I mentioned earlier, is that you've got, you may have something happen back east or in the Midwest somewhere, and we're going to be answering questions out here in the West about it because it hit national news. Yeah. And all the law enforcement then will be gauged by those actions, which is kind of unfair. We shouldn't be doing that with other professions, and we shouldn't do it with law enforcement either. But as you mentioned earlier, the real key here, this has to change, and it will change, because if it doesn't change, the overall safety of our communities are going to be diminished. We want to live in a safe community, and we want our kids to grow up in a safe community, enjoy their lives, and not be worried about their safety. That's not going to happen if our community doesn't step up and support law enforcement.
Yeah, and that goes across all racial divides, by the way. Andy Anderson.
Absolutely. And it's not to say that law enforcement should be held accountable for mistakes.
Andy Anderson, former assistant police chief for the city of Phoenix, 37 years in law enforcement. Andy, great to see you again. I appreciate your time.
You too, John. Take care.
Good to see you. Thank you. Coming up next on Newsmaker Saturday, a lawsuit filed against the FAA for how it hires air traffic controllers. It's alleged the agency is skipping over highly qualified college students to hire instead people off the street. Is safety being compromised? We talk with a former air traffic controller turned lawyer who filed this suit, and this whole thing originated out of Phoenix. It's next on Newsmaker Saturday. Welcome back. Is the FAA hiring the best and brightest in the control towers? Air traffic controllers are a breed apart, trained to handle multiple tasks in incredibly stressful conditions. In 2014, I first reported about alleged hiring discrimination within the FAA. It appeared that they were passing over highly trained, highly qualified college students in favor of hiring applicants off the street, apparently in a move to bring more diversity to the tower. But in the process, it's alleged that they compromised safety. Here's my original reporting from 2014.
South 629, wind F5.
There is growing concern the FAA is no longer hiring the best and brightest to work these towers. For the past 24 years, the FAA relied on 36 universities and colleges around the country to provide a pool of highly qualified applicants to become air traffic controllers. Under the College Training Initiative, they're known as CTI students. Arizona State University has produced hundreds of them, top-notch, highly trained candidates ready to work these towers.
I have 2 degrees, bachelor's degree in aviation management and bachelor's degree in air traffic control.
Andrew Brigida graduated from ASU last year, ready to embark on a career as a controller, when suddenly in January, the FAA announced it was changing its hiring process. Instead of giving preference to military veterans and highly trained college grads like Brigida, it began hiring applicants right off the street with no experience, apparently in an effort to hire more minorities. You have trained for 4 years to do this job. Yes. And suddenly the government announces, forget all that. We're going to hire off the street. Does that make any sense to you?
Doesn't make any sense to anybody.
For 22 years, the FAA primarily screened air traffic control applicants using a rigorous exam called the ATSAT. Brigida aced the ATSAT. Fellow ASU grad Aaron Hogan scored 99. Now, off-the-street applicants gain entry into the program by taking an online biographical assessment, or BA, comprised of 63 questions, including what has been the major cause of your failures, and how many high school sports did you participate in?
I really was confused as to what they were looking for. Some of the questions were really dumbfounding.
Bill, as we will call him, is not a student. He's a 30-year air traffic controller who's worked in some of the busiest airports in the nation. He and other controllers concerned about the FAA's changes in hiring took the biographical assessment.
I went on there as a applicant. They never asked for a social security number. I filled out a profile on the website, and
You could have been taking it for someone else.
oh, absolutely.
And what did you discover?
That apparently I'm not very qualified to be an air traffic controller. I failed the exam.
A veteran air traffic controller and dozens like him failed the biographical assessment. How is it possible that a guy who's been landing airplanes for 30 years can't pass a test?
That one you're going to have to ask the FAA on.
One veteran controller put it this way.
If they don't want educated people, highly motivated, highly skilled people as an air traffic controller, I don't know what they're looking for.
Fox 10 News obtained internal FAA documents and emails that show the biographical assessment was never validated, and the agency knew it was flawed. There is a lack of transparency about the development and predictability of the tool. Very few people seem to understand the methodology behind the BA. Human Resources has restricted briefings on the background and development of the BA, citing advice from counsel amid concerns of legal challenges.
I want to understand what this biographical questionnaire is. I want to know why people are failing, not just that they're failing, and what this is adding to the quality of the people that we're considering for this program. This, to me, is really troubling.
After pointed questions from Congress over the hiring changes at the FAA, there's this internal email from an FAA Deputy Assistant Administrator. I want to consolidate a few different email chains and make sure everyone is on the same page. We have to find a way to address congressional inquiries without hurting our cause when it comes to litigation. If the goal of the FAA was to increase minority hiring, the biographical assessment appears to be doing the opposite. Some FAA employee associations have expressed concern that many very qualified minority and women candidates, as well as veterans, were deemed ineligible based upon the BA. Whatever the motivations of the FAA may be, the hiring changes have derailed the careers of highly qualified candidates like ASU grads Aaron Hogan and Andrew Brigida. After spending $60,000 on his education, Brigida's degree is worthless.
This is what I've been planning on the past 4 or 5 years, was getting out of college, doing some aviation work, and then becoming a controller.
Unless the FAA's policy is reversed, Brigida's dream and those of thousands like him will be dashed. Joining me now is attorney Michael Pearson, who was a former air traffic controller. He's heading up this complaint against the FAA. He worked in towers in Houston and Phoenix. Michael, good to see you. Thanks for being with us. What has changed since my report in 2014?
Well, actually, a few things. It took us 7 years to get to the point where the judge in the case finally granted us class certification due to various factors. As far as the air traffic control hiring, because of lobbying from the different universities across the country, 2 statutes were passed, federal statutes by Congress. They were supposed to reset the program, which is a good thing. However, the current version of the aptitude test that air traffic controllers have to take, the one in your report said it was the ATSAT, the new one's called the ATSA, has a section in it where they ask the same biographical questions, which is odd. The old version of the aptitude test, when you took it, the ATSAT, you would get a numerical grade. You'd know what your score was, anywhere from 0 to 100. The new version, the ATSA, takes anywhere from 4 to 7 or 8 weeks to get graded and to receive a score on it. Now, what's odd about that is the new version of the so-called aptitude test has an alleged non-graded section where they've incorporated a lot of those biographical questionnaire questions that or questions like that you profiled in the original story.
So, Mike, is that to say the FAA is still trying to do an end run around what Congress said, that they didn't like the biographical assessment, that they wanted this to be based on skill, period?
I believe there's something going on. While I have no smoking gun proof, it makes absolutely no sense for a computer generated exam to not give you a score when you've taken the exam, much like the ATSAT did. Now, the period between the time where you take the current test and you get your score is problematic for me. If it's really an aptitude test based upon what you're being graded on, it doesn't need to go back to Washington, and it doesn't need 4 to 6 weeks to be looked over before you get.
Does this, Mike, does this mean that we are compromising safety with how we're hiring controllers right now?
Well, you are still compromising safety because you need, and the system needs, and is needed for quite a while, additional air traffic controllers. So, for instance, when you hire a controller, they first go to a school. It's called the FAA Academy in Oklahoma City. The pass rate for people that are off the street with no aviation background is significantly different, even though they've, I don't want to say dumbed down, but they've changed the criteria at the Oklahoma City since this new program started. But if you come into the FAA Academy as a new hire and you have experience and knowledge that you learn through these various CTI programs, you do much better. That means you'll pass on to the next level.
And then you've got more controllers. We've only got about 30 seconds left. What happens with the people like Andrew Brigida and Aaron Hogan, who we showed in that story? You've now got class action status. You're going forward with the lawsuit. Could they get recovery for what they lost in their career?
They'll get partial recovery. Lawsuits never lead to full justice and full recovery. Money doesn't always make up for the damage and the harm you suffered and the career path that they were taken off of unjustly because of discrimination. Hopefully this will send a message that the very entity that is entrusted with ensuring that the law is followed, i.e. a government agency of any sort, not just the FAA, won't take shortcuts and won't try to engage in tactics and hiring more focused on social engineering than safety. That's our goal.
It's fascinating. Michael Pearson, I appreciate your time today, and we'll keep on top of it for our viewers and have you back. Thanks, Mike. We're back in a minute on Newsmaker Saturday. If you want to see a past show of Newsmaker Saturday, here's how you can do it. Open up the camera app and capture the QR code. That'll take you right there. Or go to fox10phoenix.com/Newsmaker. We'll see you next week on Newsmaker Saturday.